Good evening. I'd like to call our regular council meeting to order at 6 p.m. Good evening to colleagues on council. Councillor Duck has another commitment and will not be attending this evening. And good evening to members of staff. I want to begin by respectfully acknowledging that the town of Sidney lies within the territory of the Saanich people. And today that is the Sartlip Nation, the Sayote Nation, the Pakwichin Nation, the Sakem Nation, and the Malahat Nation. And we express our gratitude for their stewardship of the territory over for millennia, and acknowledge the important relationship and connection that they have to these lands and waters today. I look for a motion to approve our agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We next turn to our regular public participation opportunity. Not having anyone in attendance in the chamber and not having anyone express interest to participate virtually, we will pass public participation this evening and go straight to our first item of business, which is a presentation from Staff Sergeant Conley from the Sidney North Saanich RCMP. Welcome, good evening, and we'll let you proceed with your quarterly report.
Thank you and good evening, Mayor and members of Council. It's great to be back here and just provide a little bit of update for you on the status of policing services for the town of Sidney. Not remembering exactly when I was here last, but it's a few months back for sure. So my report this evening provides a brief summary of policing priorities for 2025. As well as a status report on services and crime statistics. And I'll also include an update on detachment resource levels and just touch on the regional integrated teams which Sidney contributes funding towards. So starting with policing priorities, in early 2025, consultations were conducted with Mayor and the CAO, and internally with officers in the detachment as well, in establishing initiatives that support crime reduction and prevention, and in general enhance safety in the community on roadways. The detachment is also aligned with provincial and national priorities as well, and a brief summary, the priorities for 2025 include the following, in addition to the general calls for service and investigations that are carried out. So traffic safety is sort of our number one policing priority, in which aggressive driving, distracted driving, and impaired driving are established priorities for enforcement, as well as educational awareness for drivers. Number two priority is crime reduction strategies, which will focus on the disruption of prolific property crime offenders, persons involved in drug trafficking, and repeat violent offenders. Focused investigations will form part of this disruption strategy. And thirdly, crime prevention initiatives that will receive a heightened emphasis in 2025 will include Project 529, bike and e-bike registration program, a continuation of education awareness regarding fraud scam prevention, expansion of the Block Watch program, and dissemination of preventative measures that residents can take, as well as a supportive outreach program for unhoused individuals in the community. So what we are seeing in the first 3 months, so this report is essentially a January to the 1st of April summary. So for under criminal offenses, in the first 3 months of 2025, we saw violent crime levels increase from the previous year to levels consistent with the past 5-year average. So what we saw was a huge decline last year in the first part of the year, and then this year, while it seems like a high increase, it's actually just more a normalization of those crime levels. Property crime levels, in contrast, decreased in pretty much every crime type in Sidney. Other criminal code levels remained at similar or lower levels, with the exceptions of cause disturbance calls, where we saw a big increase there. The increase in this offense category is attributed to the actions of a couple of individuals who generated a high number of disturbance calls. With respect to traffic, the number of traffic collisions remained at identical levels to the year before. There were 0 fatalities in this period. Impaired driving enforcement levels have declined considerably, while the number of violation tickets issued increased 28% from the previous year. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the mental health calls and the mental health apprehensions the detachment is engaged in. The report actually has combined statistics for both Sidney and North Saanich. There are many variables involved, and we do see fluctuations in these statistics. The number of police apprehensions under the Mental Health Act declined in January through March, but calls involving a mental health factor remained at a similar level to the previous year. One issue that is ongoing is the wait times for police at both Royal Jubilee and Victoria General Hospital. Continues to be a big problem for impacting police resources. There has been recent discussions with the province who are engaged in a review of some potential solutions. Then just an update on the fraud scam status of that. The number of reported fraud scams in 2025 decreased in the first 3 months, but this crime type remains a significant problem and an impact to our communities. An analysis of recent changes seen have been scams where the party claimed to be a business, government agency, a bank, or police, the various different organizations that are impersonated. These scam crimes are preventable, but they require our community members to be vigilant, to be informed, to follow safe practices, and to rely on known and trusted agencies and persons to guide them, such as their family members, the financial institutions, financial advisors, the police, of course, just neighbors, just some people that are trusted in their circle of influence. I thought I would mention a little bit about so we have our major crime unit and a few successes seen there. In recent months, the detachment's major crime section has continued investigative work on a number of more complex investigations. An ongoing investigation into a series of Federal Express break-and-enter investigations have resulted in charges being approved against 3 individuals. So that actually was a multi-jurisdiction investigation. It did not directly involve Sidney, but it involved Up Island communities, our Fed Express facility here, and it involved offenders living in other jurisdictions. In early April, the Sidney Scotia Bank was subject of a robbery incident and generated considerable community interest. I think everybody in Sidney knows about that incident. There was an extensive investigation that resulted in the recent approval of robbery and possession of stolen property charges against 1 individual. And I just want to comment, the detachment is very appreciative to the businesses and residents who assisted the police in this investigation. It was very, very, very beneficial to us being successful. And then to add that the major crime section has several other complex investigations in progress for, just to mention a few, a high-value fraud, a sexual assault with multiple victims, and multiple child exploitation offenses they are working on. So then, lastly, just wanted to touch on deployments. resources, implementations. We are just on the cusp of the G7. We have 3 officers that are going to be deployed to G7 for probably 3 weeks is what we're what we're being informed. So we will be able to manage that. It won't affect the policing services here because we've made some adjustments as needed to manage. Also wanted to mention that the body-worn camera rollout is at our doorstep. Our detachment was scheduled to be going live with body-worn cameras this next month in June, but there has been a little delay. I'm waiting to hear back from that. I expect it to be 1 to 2 months before we actually see that. So it's going to create a number of changes for us internally in terms of how that will all be managed. As you might appreciate, there's an incredible amount of data that's going to be involved. The staffing levels at the detachment, I will say, remain at work in progress. A recent resignation and another officer transfer will result in vacancies over the summer. The resignation was a surprise to me. And we have additional soft vacancies for parental leave and medical related matters. Our support staff is, we have hired a new office manager. Our previous office manager is just her last day is Wednesday. We have 2 other municipal employees that are leaving. Well, one has left and another one is leaving, I think, in the middle of June. So we're actively working with the town to engage in the hiring process, hopefully to find some experienced people out there to replace those positions. And I just wanted to say that I know that I'd raised it previously about the regional integrated teams, which Sidney funds, the regional domestic violence unit, the mental health team, IMCERT, they refer them to. MIST is the mobile youth services team. So there is, in collaboration with the other police leaders, the chiefs of other departments, there is a bit of a review and study going on to evaluate how tracking of their engagement will change. It's just that we haven't been able to sort of recognize exactly what sort of contributions there have been to our community, so we're wanting to get more details on that. So we're waiting for that review to be completed. So that pretty much summarizes my quarterly report and update to you, Mayor, and council members.
Thank you very much for the report. I'll turn to colleagues if there are councils. I'll begin with Councillor Duncan and then Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you. So when you have the priorities for 2025, are that something that you get to set as a department kind of based on where you see your priorities, or is this something that's kind of federally through the RCMP?
It's mainly what we feel locally is sort of priority areas for us here, but they do align. We typically try to align them with national and provincial priorities as well. Traffic has been a policing priority for many, many years. Mm-hmm. I expect it to stay there because it's just such a big issue, right? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Conley, for your informative report and for your presentation. Just a comment and a question, because you pretty much answered everything I was going to ask with your report that you gave here. And I looked at the same thing. I always look at the wait times and noticed that it's like almost double from 2023 in terms of maybe less, but actual time longer there. And I'm glad to hear that the province is engaging on possible solutions, because you think about that, that's a quarter of a shift. You're not actually doing policing in the community. So hopefully they'll come to some kind of resolution where that can, benefit our community. Just the fraudulent scams, and this is just a personal anecdotal thing. I'm in the bank pretty much every week, sometimes a couple of times a week, and I overhear all the time. Like, I can't remember the last time I was at the bank where I didn't overhear a conversation about somebody there coming to the bank because they were scammed. So I'm wondering, although we see a decrease in the reported amounts, do you think that number, or sense that number might be quite a bit higher because people are too embarrassed to actually report it?
Oh, I definitely agree with you. I think this is what we see in terms of reports to the police is just the tip of the iceberg. We have collaborated with the bank folks, and they tell me that there isn't a day goes by that they aren't trying to either prevent, help a customer, prevent them from being engaged in a scam type incident, or they're dealing with the aftermath of something. And I think they encourage them to report to police, but often they don't. And I think it's good to know that those persons involved in the scam offenses are spending an inordinate amount of time to convince people that they shouldn't go to the police and they shouldn't trust the bank officials. And it's a very, very difficult issue to try and break down where they've gotten to. And so it's a challenging piece, and we see I think we do what we can to try to keep the awareness high, but it's an ongoing battle for sure.
Yeah, and it seems to just be they're becoming more and more sophisticated, so it's becoming more and more difficult to combat. Every time you combat on an angle, something else pops up that you didn't think about. So, wish you well with that. That's going to be a big challenge. Thank you very much.
And I don't think Sidney, although Sidney has a population base that maybe is a little more vulnerable than some communities, I think every community is facing the same challenges to some extent. Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Rentoul, please.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Staff Sergeant Conley, for your presentation. And this is somewhat unfair because it wasn't part of your presentation, but we will be discussing later e-com dispatch and the costs of e-com being downloaded to municipalities as early as this fiscal year. And so with that in mind, and given that you're a user, you represent a user agency of e-com, I'm just curious because we see certainly in fire dispatch, it's a more competitive environment. There are other service providers that fill the role of dispatch for 911 fire. Doesn't appear to be for policing. It appears to be e-com alone. So I'm curious, do e-com survey the RCMP as a user group or on a detachment basis in terms of your satisfaction with the level of their service, or what insight have you maybe got for us as we enter those discussions regarding the future of police dispatch?
Well, I guess to say that I know that there is a police representative that sits on not an RCMP, but a municipal police representative who sits on one of the committees that are directly involved or engaged with e-com. I'm not really privy to exactly, what they cover in that committee, but he does report at our area chiefs meetings that we have on a monthly basis. I guess I can say to you that historically that move was to amalgamate and to provide a service to all of the communities and try to avoid the duplication of. I think if we look back, Victoria had their own dispatch centers, Saanich had theirs, and West Shore had the one for the RCMP. So that was a vision, I guess, of efficiency. But it's I guess it's one that I wasn't involved in the politics of it, so I don't know what has led to the province's decision to have those costs downloaded to the municipalities. From a service perspective, I would say that when e-com first started delivering services, they had a lot of challenges. They weren't able to provide the numbers of people that they needed to deliver, so they may have underestimated the amount of work that was involved. They had challenges with having trained staff, but I have seen that sort of stabilize over the last while, and they seem to be providing a much more stable level of service. In terms of do they survey us? I mean, I see emails that report on changes that they're making, how they've established procedures that are more uniform, but I'm not remembering that I was getting a survey in terms of their service level, but I forget things. So
No,
maybe a while back.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And just for clarity's sake, I guess this detachment would be dispatched out of the new ECOM dispatch location in the Victoria area, is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're every police agency from, I believe, from Ladysmith, maybe not Ladysmith, but everything from Duncan south is part of the ECOM dispatch service, and then there's a North Island comm center out of Courtney that serves the North Island.
Okay, thanks for that, appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you again for a very interesting report. I'm wondering about the criminal stats, first of all, whether you have any sense in terms of what percentage of those might be attributed to unhoused individuals. Do you track that sort of stuff, or have kind of a anecdotal sense of what that might be?
We don't track that, on an individual basis. I mean, it's a file by file sort of assessment that we're able to do. I think the only thing that I could comment in relation to your comment is that reference to disturbance calls was a result of repeated calls involving some unhoused individuals, but aside from that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. I was also wondering about the charge approval rate. And so my understanding of the stats is that it's usually been in the range of 67 to 73%. And it looks like in this last quarter, there were 378 investigations in the first quarter, enough evidence to forward 41, which seems like a pretty low charge rate. And I'm just wondering if I'm understanding that correctly, and if so, what would be the reason for such a low rate?
Yeah, it is a lower rate than we've seen in previous years, for sure. It says that 10 of the 41 were declined by Crown, and 8 are awaiting that'd be a charge approval decision. So we might see that number increase based on the results of that 8. The 10 declined could be like a number of different reasons, based on, like, there's just so many reasons. Sometimes it's the circumstances associated with if there's a victim involved. Sometimes it's just the strength of the evidence in and of itself, right? So we don't not report all the evidence in a case that, it's a full disclosure situation that we provide to Crown, but they're the ones who will make that decision about the likelihood. They often refer to it as a substantial likelihood of a conviction, so that weighs into their decision making and whether it's in the public interest.
Right, yeah, of course. I guess what I'm looking at is that a correct number, 378 there was 378 criminal code investigations, but only enough evidence for 41. And I guess what I'm wondering is, I imagine that those investigations take a lot of time. And when you see that there's such a low charge rate, is there something going on there that, you know, the prosecutors are demanding more sorts of evidence, or is it because we're short-staffed that we can't do the investigations and get the evidence they need? Just trying to get a sense of what.
So, yeah, I think I can help clarify a couple things. So when we talk about 378 criminal code investigations, they could be like anything from like some type of a property crime or a violent crime where we just don't have the evidence to, you know, identify the person involved and support criminal charges. And I don't think that is like a different statistic that you would see in most communities. I think it would be very much in line with that.
Okay.
But I would say that, you know, you mentioned the time that it takes to conduct an investigation. So sometimes I think what is probably not well understood is how involved some investigations are. For example, I mentioned the Federal Express investigation. That has been going on for a year, that investigation. And with, you know, hundreds and hundreds of hours of investigative time, and just the collection of evidence, a lot of it's video, and then all of the disclosure that has to go along with that is like an enormous task now, especially if it's considered a benchmark offense. So, yeah, we have a wide range of investigations, some that are, you know, they're fairly short and sweet, and others go on and on for a long period of time. But
Right. Okay, thank you.
hopefully that's kind of giving you a bit
Yeah.
more information.
Sure.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Nova.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Staff Sergeant. Interesting report as always. I've only got one question. One of the common threads that we seem to see every time you come before us is that there are some issues with staffing, both of uniform members and now we hear of civilian staff. And I would guess that in a much larger detachment, there's always some turnover, but it shouldn't impact the performance or productivity of the detachment. And I'm wondering, in a small detachment such as ours, where even the absence of one constable is a significant percentage of the uniformed group, I just want your sense of how much staffing issues is impacting the performance and or productivity of the detachment.
That's a great question. Well, the honest answer that I can provide is that I am as engaged as I can possibly be in keeping the detachment staffed. But there are certain things that I don't have control over, of course, right? So, as I mentioned, an officer recently decided to join another police agency. That's his prerogative. He wasn't able to provide much notice, so we're going to be short till we can find a replacement officer. All of the soft vacancy things that come into play with medical issues. Policing is a tough business nowadays. It's not a fun job to be involved in, and it does have some implications on the officers as they're out there engaging in different things. I know sometimes in Sidney we don't know what they're involved in because a lot of those things don't hit the public, but I can tell you this past weekend alone there were some very tragic things that happened in our community, and our officers are dealing with those. So that's the reality of what happens. And so we're going to have you know, the soft vacancy things that happen. and then we have to figure out how to manage them. So I work closely with the staffing folks, but I don't mind to tell you that it is getting more difficult to staff the detachment because there seems to be less, I guess all I can really say is there's less interest in members, so experienced members transferring here. That's, you know, I've been here policing in this community for quite a long time. It's the first time I've seen it to this level, so it's become challenging to do that, but I'm optimistic that we will always find people. We just won't have as many to pick from. Your question though about how does it impact resources, I think what I would share is that I have the responsibility to determine and decide what is critical and what is maybe the non-essential pieces of policing that we can, for short periods of time, that we can trim in order to deliver what's essential to the community. My position on that has been our core policing, and when we talk about core policing, it's the general duty officers that work the watch system. So it's we have 4 watches that rotate. We have 5 officers per watch when they're fully staffed, and my decision has been to keep those positions fully staffed and to trim when we have vacancies in some of the specialized areas. So we haven't had traffic positions filled for a long time. We're putting our community policing officer back onto the watches for the summer so that we can deliver those core policings. And when I say core policings, that's 24-hour policing, 24 hours, 7 days a week, emergency response, calls for service, investigations that are priorities. That's our bread and butter, to be able to deliver that, because that's where public safety hits the road. So when we think about, well, how do you manage it? It's essentially how I'm managing that. It's kind of interesting because I just wrote a business case. I don't mind to share this. I wrote a business case that was submitted to our staffing unit to get approval for what we call surplus to establishment. So that means an officer who has been off on light duties for an extended period of time for medical related reasons. So that business case was to express why we needed to get an officer to backfill that officer. And I got approval for it today. So it's work, but it's important work, and I'm jumping through the hoops to try and make those things happen out of the interest of this is what the community needs. And so I will say the vacancy rate is closely managed by our district office, and I'm quite sure that if we got to a point where, you know, our levels were at a critical level, that they would assist me in finding a solution to that. But right now, to say where are we at, we're not too bad of shape. We're going to be a little lean through the summer. I expect to get a couple replacements in the fall, and then we'll be in better shape, but I don't know what's ahead.
Okay, thank you very much.
That was a long answer. I'm very sorry about that.
but that's what I was looking for, because that, as I said, it's a thread that seems to appear every time you're before us, and I feel badly because, as you say, it's your responsibility to deal with that. I don't know if there's anything we can do as a council. I doubt it, but you know, it's in our best interest to ensure that policing is at its at its peak efficiency. And if there are issues which are impacting that, I don't know what the solutions are that are outside of your purview. But I'm glad to at least hear what the reality of the situation is. So thank you for that.
If I can add a comment
Sure.
Please do.
in response to that. So I think how you can support this issue is, I'll go on a little limb here. You have a contract as a municipality. The contract is for 16 officers. And it's I guess, incumbent on mayor and council to communicate what those expectations are. So I'm the deliverer of the service. So if you have a message for me, then bring it to me.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
I'll turn to Councillor
Thank you,
Duncan for a
Steph.
second time.
Yeah, thank you. After hearing everybody else's questions, I had follow-ups. I guess the first would be on following up on the disturbance calls. I imagine you always have to go if you receive a call to investigate no matter what, but what fraction would you say are ones where the disturbance is a genuine disturbance that is, against a bylaw? Because I know the police are the bylaw enforcers at, outside business hours, or an actual threat to safety. And how many are ones where there may be a perception of disturbance that isn't there? And the example I'm thinking of is we once received a letter for receipt where somebody said they'd been intending to move to Sidney, but then they saw when the church came to council and said there were 12 homeless people in Sidney, they weren't going to move here anymore because clearly the town had gone to the dogs. And so I'm wondering, because we've had a lot of growth recently, how many of the disturbance calls are for somebody actually doing something, and how many are from new people who just think differently about what should be here?
Okay, so I think, just to help you understand how calls get classified, so there is a scoring mechanism that categorizes calls into, what category do they fall into. So the narrative, so every police file has a synopsis. Basically, it's a summary, but it's a structured summary that has to encompass basically what were the details of that call and what was the response to it, summarizing it up, and then there will be lots of other, narratives that may go along with that file in addition to that summary. So when that file is reviewed, it's classified as to what it is. So it would not meet a cause of disturbance category unless there wasn't some sort of meat there to support that. If it wasn't there, if that information was there, it would be categorized as something else.
Oh, thank you. That's really helpful. So, I mean, from perspective of the questions about your staffing and your load, obviously people had to take time to go through these things and time to respond. So it is contributing to your staffing load, but it isn't contributing to the stats that are showing increases. The increases are real, and the staffing associated with those increases is probably even greater, by the sounds of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So the second question, I guess, then was with the ongoing staffing challenges, which are obviously not unique to your detachment or the RCMP. Everybody, it's just a problem in general. And what most industries are doing is, of course, having work permits, right, and temporary foreign workers. And it's really obvious when you go around town that that's how people are basically keeping a lot of businesses afloat. And I'm just wondering if there's foreign recruitment for RCMP, because I thought, man, I've heard about the policing in Mexico and India, and I imagine some of those guys would be like, even their worst day makes mine look great, that we would be very attractive and at the pay scale for some countries. But I don't know if it's like just such a training barrier, or if there's some contract thing against it, or if that's looked at all.
Well, I can only say that the RCMP is making great progress in the recruiting push that they've been undergoing. There's pretty clear guidelines, I believe, around you know, the applicant process and what's required for an applicant. I'm just not really involved in the recruiting process other than to try and support it. We had a volunteer last year that came and he worked with our detachment as a volunteer. He came to the street market, which we'll do again this year as we can. And he was successful in his application. And then he went to our training center in Regina, and he just graduated. And then I was disappointed to hear that he's going to Alberta because that's where he wants to go. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting how it goes. But I do know, I mean, I hear from our district senior management that there are you know, some real increased numbers that are going through training. I also know that the Surrey situation has maybe turned out different than was initially thought. We're not seeing those people coming to the island per se that were leaving. So I don't know. I didn't know what to expect there, but it's different than it was initially thought. Okay. That I initially thought. I don't know about others. So I think that we're progressing in a pretty good way actually on the recruiting side of it. We could use more recruits, I'm sure, but
yeah, it just sounded that I have no idea how the government decides which categories of work become something that they want to do work permits for, and so I thought it seemed like a professional category that maybe they would, but it sounds like you haven't heard that, and I don't know. It sounds like you feel like improvements are happening across the board that they wouldn't do that anyway. Then it's not.
Well, I think I can say this, that the screening process to get into policing is very stringent. So yeah, it's you know, you have to have a very very strong application to be successful going through the policing application process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And Staff Sergeant Conley, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for, Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up from Councillor Duncan's question, triggered a memory in me. When I lived in North Vancouver, the RCMP detachment there, as I recall, had an auxiliary policing unit. And I'm just wondering if the idea of an auxiliary policing unit with your detachment, A, would make sense, and B, would that provide any relief from your ongoing staffing issues? And is it feasible?
Yeah. Well, I'll just give you a really short answer. So the previous RCMP auxiliary program, which we had in place for many, many years, ended up being scrutinized by the province of BC as a result of some concerns that happened. There were some incidents that happened, one of which I believe was in Alberta. And then that resulted in a decision that the program would be suspended until they sort of reevaluated and they came up with a new program. They do now, after a few years, have resurrected a new program, but that new program is a tiered program. And formerly, auxiliaries were armed, trained in use of force, like they would accompany officers on calls, and the new program does not permit that or support that. So they would be able to accompany an officer, but they wouldn't be able to be involved in certain types of calls. So I have been weighing this, you know, re-implementing the program, but to be honest with you, I got other higher priorities right now. And it takes someone, it's going to take some time to get it off the ground and an application process to train people. It's going to be a bit of a process, right? So it's not something that's on the shelf. It's just on the side for now. Yeah. Thank you for your inquiry on that.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, colleagues. Again, Staff Sergeant Conley, thank you for your presentation, taking our questions. And on behalf of the town, on behalf of the community, we express our gratitude to your lengthy service in our community, and to you and your members for the professional policing service that we receive, and for the proactive measures you take in crime reduction and crime awareness, so to keep our community safe. Thank you.
Much appreciated, Mayor and members of council. Thank you. I will be sure to convey that. I know the members like to know that, and they do know. I do share with them that our municipal partners are very much behind them and supporting them. So I thank you again for all that you do behind the scenes.
Thank you.
Thank
Please
you.
do. We'll next turn to item 5 on our agenda, which is a couple of bylaws. Under 5A, we have bylaw number 2290, which is amendment number 1 to our zoning bylaw to allow up to 4 dwelling units on property within the multi-unit residential group of zones with lot areas less than 750 square meters. We did have a staff report and discussion at a previous meeting, gave readings, and have posted notice in the appropriate places. We have no written submissions. And so we can proceed with 3 readings this evening. Councillor Novak.
I'll move that bylaw number 2290, zoning amendment number 1, to allow up to 4 dwelling units on property within the multi-unit residential group of zones with lot areas less than 750 square meters be given first reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. Before going to second reading, we can just read the recommendation. I've introduced the item, the bylaw, and what it's covering.
Fair enough. And I'll move that the bylaw be given second reading.
Second.
This is the time when we have any discussion. Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Carries unanimous. Councillor?
And I move that the bylaw be given third reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? And that motion carries. Thank you. That will come forward to a future meeting for adoption. Returning to item 5B, which is bylaw number 2291, tree preservation, amendment number 4 to our tree preservation bylaw. We have discussed this at a previous meeting and given readings, and we do have a recommendation.
Move adoption.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Rintoul, seconded by Councillor Garnett. Any discussion? Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a quick question. Maybe Councillor Duncan was going to ask the same thing. I'm not sure, but just for previous discussion today, just for the public knowledge more than anything else, just the specimen quality tree. Given the correspondence we've received from many individuals about the 3 cypress trees on 4th Street, and if staff could just weigh in on the fact that these may or may not qualify.
Through to Councillor Garnett, yes, the trees on 4th Street the Monterey cypress trees would be quantified as specimen quality trees. That is something that is up to the discretion of the director and would be under the direction of the town's arborist. So yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask that one for the record, but I had a second question. It's not related to this, but I thought since it came up from the public when this came up, I should state it into the record regarding black cottonwood as a protected species. That even though it is a native species that's endemic to this area, it is not protected in any municipal tree protection bylaws, and in large part, just because of the habits of that tree, when it is cut down, it suckers profusely and it drops limbs, and of course it makes all that cotton, which is really, really messy, and so homeowners tend to find it's a conflict. And so black cottonwoods, when they do become very sizable in this area, will be protected just like any tree based on their diameter, but they are not protected in our tree bylaw nor any others based on species.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I assume that since the motion is that the bylaw be adopted, there's some motivation here. I just want to say that I'm still opposed to this, as I was initially. I still feel that this is excessive, that putting security deposits on trees is simply adding to the cost of building new residential units in the town, increases the prices that are going out to the public, and I think the bylaw is strong enough without a security deposit having to be in place. So I'm still opposed to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Novit. I'll turn a question through myself to staff. Are there security deposits currently required?
Through to the mayor, there are not for trees. The kind of precedent-setting property, there was a development on, I believe, Orchard Avenue, and as part of the development permit, council made a resolution to take a security deposit of $3,000 per tree. So in the town, there's not currently security deposits to protect trees that are to be protected for development. There are in other municipalities, though, which is what was used to draft this bylaw.
Yep. Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Novak is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We're next turning to adoption of minutes. We have two sets of minutes, those from our special council meeting of May 12th and those from our regular council meeting of May 12th. I look for a motion to approve. Moved by Councillor Novak. Second by Councillor O'Keefe. Any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We're next turning to the Mayor's report. We do have the CRD board highlights from the CRD April 9th board meeting in our package. I usually note that those reports also include links to the various staff reports and other information provided at the board. I don't have anything that I wish to further highlight, but I'm willing to take any questions from colleagues. Councillor Gurnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'm just sort of seeking information outside of this, and it's with regards to the Lochside Trail, the part that it's been a while and getting repaired. I'm just curious as to if you might know why there hasn't been on site for the last week and a half, and there's about 150 to 200 meters from the end of the path to the water overpass that has not been completed. And I noted today when I looked, there's quite a bit of a lip that's coming, and the spray paint that they've spray painted to highlight that for people is gone. And I did note that a gentleman in an electric wheelchair did get stuck and had to be helped onto the overpass. So I'm just curious if there's any information that might come forward as to whether that's going to be completed soon.
Thank you. I'll turn to staff if they might be able to provide an update. Ms. Cleary, please.
Sure. Through to Councillor Garnett, as they were getting ready to pave, they noticed they've had some drainage challenges throughout the project, so they put in some additional drainage, which is part of the reason, which is really the main reason why it has taken so long. And so as they were preparing for paving, they noticed some more drainage challenges that didn't let them reach their required compaction that they need before they pave the prepared area. So they are working on improving that drainage in the last section, and then they'll come back and pave it once they have a solution to that.
Councillor?
If I may, through you to staff, I mean, is there anything they can do to mitigate that lip that's been created? Just because it is actually a tripping hazard as well. So
I'll reach out to them tomorrow. I wasn't aware of that issue, so I'll reach out to them and let them know about the issue of people not being able to get over that lip. So
right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further comments, we'll move on to the next item, which are committee reports, which we have one today. That is we're receiving the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting of May 20th. We don't require a motion. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Not seeing any. I'll now turn to Councillor Duncan, who chaired our last Committee of the Whole meeting, to take us through the recommendation, please.
Thank you. So committee recommends, and I so move, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 75 meters, 246 feet of 9990 4th Street be notified regarding development variance application number DV100374 to increase the maximum fence height to 2.15 meters, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council at the time of consideration of approval of the variance.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
No, briefly, I guess I'll just go over that at Committee of the Whole had very little discussion about this because it's a very straightforward application. It's to replace a fence that's fallen down where there's unevenness between the two neighbors' properties. And so to compensate for change in slope in the land, and to kind of buffer the fence against loose topsoil and things that are higher than the property where the fence is being built, the tenants wish to, or the residents wish to have the ability to build a fence a little bit higher, but it may not necessarily be as high as this, so.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll acknowledge the exquisite timing of the applicants this evening and call the question. All in favor? None are opposed. That carries unanimous. Thank you. And just turning to staff with the applicants in attendance, that notice will go out and it would come back to the next council meeting in June, or is that uncertain at this time?
As far as we know at the moment, it'll go out and come back to the next council, pending any Canada Post action.
Thank you. Okay, we'll turn to our next item, which is staff reports, and the first is item 13A, impact of U.S. tariffs on town purchasing. I'll turn to Mr. Hissick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council asked us to report back on two items related to the trade dispute with the U.S. One being the potential impact of U.S.-Canada tariffs to the town's municipal operations, and two, the town's procurement process and the impact of prioritizing Canadian-made products and services. So while the impacts on our operations are difficult to predict with a high degree of certainty, it's fairly certain that we will see an escalation of inflation, just as it was beginning to come down to more traditional levels. How much and for how long remains to be seen. We're in a highly unpredictable period. The report lays out a few food for thought items, if you will, just certain things for council to consider prior to making any decisions. And a few highlights from the report are as follows. There are a few trade agreements that we have to live up to with various rules for purchases above different thresholds. And fortunately, the vast majority of the town's purchases fall under those thresholds. And also, we do not buy very much directly from the U.S., certainly not directly. Out of those trade agreements, it's important to note that none of them involve the U.S. There's really no legal impediment to excluding U.S. suppliers. However, there are still implications to the town if we were to do so. Because our economies and supply chains are so interlinked, we could end up with certain measures that might have unintended consequences of impacting the Canadian economy as much as the U.S. It's difficult to define what buy Canadian really means. How do you define what a Canadian company is? Is it enough that the company is based here, employs Canadians, and pays local taxes? Certainly that's one definition that we could more easily work with should we choose to focus on buying Canadian. Of the two recommendations in the report, they're not mutually exclusive and that they could both be employed. The second recommendation is a small tweak to what we're already doing, but with an even greater emphasis on Canadian and local. And of course, as always, we feel that keeping costs as low as possible, regardless of the origin of the product, maintains one of our key responsibilities. With that, are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn to colleagues. I'll begin with Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff. I guess I'm curious why our overarching policy over a long period of time wouldn't have been to favor Canadian suppliers where possible and where feasible. I mean, isn't that something we would do just as a matter of course?
The vast majority of our purchases are below thresholds. We don't have to worry about those trade agreement rules. And in practice, we have tried to keep it local, but it's always been keep it also transparent and go through whatever processes we need for different expenditure thresholds for competitive processes. And up until now, there has been less and less reason to focus on purely Canadian because of the interlinkages between our economies. It's really one big economy, and until recently, it seemed like something that perhaps wasn't necessarily worth the extra time and effort.
I guess I'm just wondering if, you know, if we adopt these options, either one or both, is anything going to change? Because we would typically put out, you know, purchase RFPs or whatever it is that we use, that would minimize costs for the town. That would just be a natural situation. And if the lower cost item was American, would these options suggest that we would buy Canadian in spite of the fact that we would save money by buying an American equivalent?
Councillor, the devil will be in the details of the policy that we bring forward should council direct us to do so. I can see putting parameters in place where there would be scoring that would favor Canadians, but it wouldn't be 100% ironclad, and it would be just one of the factors, although a significant one that we would consider. And where the overall best value for that product would be, I think we're still open to going with whatever our evaluation results dictate.
So I completely hear you, I completely agree with you, and what you're saying makes absolutely perfect sense. And you would think that we would have such a purchasing policy in place anyway, and I guess my point is, I'm not really sure.
Sorry, Councillor, I'm going to interject for a moment and just ask if you're motivating or leading up to another question.
Well, I'm kind of leading up to another question, and the question is, are these options, should we implement them, going to change anything?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Novick, time will tell. Honestly, I think it's such an evolving situation. From a professional perspective, I have to think that common sense will ultimately prevail. And like I said in my previous response, it's still just waiting. That's outlined in our processes that we employ during the evaluation, and it's impossible for me to predict how those will impact our purchasing decisions going forward. It's likely if we put these criteria in, we'll trend more towards Canadian suppliers than in the past, but let's see how it goes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions? I do have one, and that is the option one recommendation makes reference to amending the purchasing policy, and the option two does not include an amendment to purchasing policy. We do have purchasing policy for all procurement. Is it possible to in option one the word focus on options on local and Canadian is in both recommendations. Is it possible to keep that in option one without looking to amend the policy? I'm just not sure why we're looking to amend the policy in option one and not in option two. I appreciate the difference between the two are the relevant trade agreements have thresholds. Staff have indicated, you've indicated that most of our procurement is below those trade agreement thresholds, and the second option is for purchases below the trade agreement thresholds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say that the policy is badly in need of an amendment anyway. I think by focusing a bit more on the policy for the, let's say, the more exacting policy change we're considering here would be just a more robust way of backing up our position and making it more defendable.
Thank you. Do staff anticipate a significant resource in working on amendment to the policy in option 1?
I believe we could chip away at it over the next couple of months, maybe get some good examples from amendments others have made. I can see bringing this back at the August meeting without requiring any further resources, but it's difficult to say what else might come up in the interim, so could be August, could be September.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. In the report mentions that staff have been pondering social procurement for a while, which I think is a good idea. Maybe this is a time to consider that. And I also note staff's comment about including some Canadian value added in the weighting criteria of our purchasing policy. If we were to broaden kind of the scope of this procurement policy review outside of just, buy Canadian or buy local, could we include that social procurement aspect now, or would that take a little bit more research on staff's part to dive into that?
I suppose that depends on council's wishes. If we wanted the focus to be mainly on the tariff-related changes, it could be a quicker turnaround. If you wanted a more comprehensive review, it might take a bit longer. And what we're proposing is to bring back a draft, perhaps with a couple of a la carte options when we do bring it back. And I think because an amendment to this policy is so overdue, we'd probably wanted to take a good long look at different aspects that we've been considering over the last few years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'll have a follow-up question to that, and that is, if council was to move forward with one or both of these recommendations this evening, would staff look to bring forward at a later date? You indicated that moving forward on these would lead to a quicker turnaround back to council in August or September, but if we were to add a review considering social procurement would be longer. So if we were to approve these recommendations, would staff still look at some future date to review the policies on social, with regards to social procurement? Without direction from council?
Certainly we'll be looking at all possible improvements, including social, environmental, all of it, to try and bring it back into one thorough, all-encompassing policy.
Thank you. Councillor Rintoul?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, because the Mayor has noted, as I think another speaker did, that there's the prospect that both of these recommendations could be moved and supported this evening. The staff report list them as options, one or the other, essentially. My understanding on reading it was that this could just be an and essentially one motion. Does staff feel contrary to that?
Not at all, Councillor. They certainly could work in conjunction. It was more laid out in terms of one, do this, or two, essentially do what we're already doing. So, but certainly an and would be very effective here as well.
Thank you. I'm prepared to move a motion if the chair is ready.
Please do.
Thank you. I'll move that staff bring forward an amended purchasing policy for council's consideration, focusing on options to buy Canadian in ways that remain compliant with relevant trade agreements, and that staff be directed to focus on local and Canadian suppliers with purchases below trade agreement thresholds.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. If a council member does wish to separate them, we can do that, but I'll leave them on the floor as one motion. I'll turn to the mover.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we've heard, certainly this was an initiative. I know that council collectively we're keen to see move forward in the current climate. And staff have acknowledged the need to refresh this this policy at any rate. So I'm pleased to see us moving forward in this direction. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gannett as the seconder. Any discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I'm not leaning towards supporting this for a few reasons. I think when we embarked on this, and this was passed unanimously to look into this, it sounded initially in this current environment that maybe this is a good idea. However, my read on the report and what I'm hearing from staff is that we aren't a big purchaser of U.S. products anyways. Even if we decide to exclude American suppliers for some of those larger, even small procurements, I think it would be difficult to define what it means to buy Canadian or to buy local. So when we say buy local, does that mean in Sidney or in our Saanich or the Saanich Peninsula or Greater Victoria? So I think that would be difficult to determine. And the report also identifies what does it mean to be Canadian, that they have an office here, that they hire Canadian employees. So I think that's a difficult aspect. And I think also the landscape on the whole tariff situation has been quite erratic. It's been on again, off again. And so a concern I have is that we're tasking staff to go and put something into place and make changes to our policy on something that may change again in the near future. And while I recognize that staff have said our policy needs some tweaking anyways, I would be more interested in having us look at the policy in terms of some of the suggestions staff have made in regards to incorporating sort of local knowledge and that sort of thing into our policy and the social procurement, because it's with the social procurement, I think, that we're going to have the most impact. And I think the way that we draft that could also be addressing the buying local or the buying Canadian. So in its current format, yeah, I'm opposed to them spending time on something that I don't think is gonna have a huge impact and isn't gonna get us to a place where I think we need to be with our procurement policy with these two options. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with just about everything that Councillor O'Keefe has just said. That being stated, I'm going to support the motion on the floor because it's something that we should be doing anyway. And the way I see it, once this passes, council's going to, or rather staff are going to go back to their offices and basically tweak an existing purchasing policy to do what, in my opinion, should already have been done. We should always be focusing and supporting our Canadian producers or suppliers or service providers. I don't think that defeating this motion is going to bring anything positive to us. And accepting the motion or having the motion go through is going to have us, like I said, do something that we should already have been doing. So I'd like to see this go forward and see our purchasing policy tweaked to advantage. And while the situation may change in the future as far as tariffs and other concerns with American supplies exist, I don't see that should change how we approach our purchasing over the long haul. So I'm happy to go with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. If I have a question through you to staff first. If you were to kind of start going through this policy buy Canadian, and as Councillor O'Keefe pointed out, there's social procurement updates that we're going to do. Should we, if we wanted to, while this was going through, and I feel these things are related, as Councillor Novak has very much pointed out, these kind of are practices that seem to have some relation. Is this something we could make an additional motion to give staff the direction to look at that at the same time? I'm sorry, is that on number 2?
Sorry,
Oh.
if I can just...
Oh, you have that. To make an additional motion. Go ahead.
Sorry, you continue.
Yeah, I was asking if staff would appreciate direction to put that through, but it seems that Councillor O'Keefe may have intended to do that as a motion arising, potentially. Yes, she's nodding. But the mayor, if you had a comment on that.
No, I mean, I did ask the question whether staff would look to address social procurement or other aspects of the purchasing policy over and above what we've requested through these motions here, and staff have indicated yes, they would do that at some time. If we were to impose that at this time, then it would be perhaps a much longer turnaround time until it came back to council. So yes, council can give direction, but we've also heard from staff that if we don't pass a motion arising with regards to social procurement or things other than what's in these motions, that staff will be doing it at some juncture.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying the, I guess, way it can be parceled out, right? I guess it's funny for me that I feel like I spent so much time trying to advocate for things like buying local and localizing our supply chains, because I was really involved in the transition town kind of movement where it was relocalizing for environmental and social reasons, resilience. And then the COVID pandemic really highlighted, I think, for a lot of people who had been in that community, that a lot of the vulnerabilities people have been talking about with the interconnection of our world were very, very real. And it felt like that was the impetus, was the pandemic, and saying we need to relocalize our supply chains. And at that time, sitting on the CRD Water Board, we were asking a lot of questions about making sure we could procure the chemicals required for the plant and the materials for the constant repairs. And I mean, there were chlorine plants that were going down in the United States and only one or two left that could supply things. And so I think this is part of a process that has been in place for some time, and that isn't necessarily solely in response to the recent US tariffs. Those are just kind of the next step in what has been an ongoing process as we've realized what the vulnerabilities really are. So I don't see this as a radical step, and it doesn't, and while doing it may not really impact what we're doing, I think it does make clear that in relation to both emergencies that we've had before that have made us vulnerable and impacted our town finances, and in addition to global situations that may be changing, this is still probably a good thing to do. And I feel confident that staff are kind of wording it in such a way that they're not going to be responding to the shifting ground, but rather to hopefully kind of the fundamentals that are there that they can do that would be a good bet to do regardless of what that shifting, the specific tariffs might be. But just knowing that this has been identified as some kind of a risk going forward. So I'll support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Gannett.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll continue to support the motion, and from the perspective that, on again, off again tariffs, I think it's important to remember that the hypothetical border issue tariffs are still in place, the auto sector tariffs are still in place, and the aluminum steel tariffs are all still in place. And Canadians, and many of them, have lost their jobs or have been furloughed. So if even in a small way, this change of our policy, even in the minutest way, can help Canadian employment and jobs, then I'm for it. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm in support of the motion. I think concerns that we should have been doing this already were addressed by staff in terms of previous to the U.S. administration's change in tariffs. It was a very integrated economy, and there wasn't a need to do this to the level we're considering now, or with this. I think this is a worthy review. In terms of if there are changes in tariffs, I think this is still a strengthening of our policy that will serve us well. However, tariffs may or may not change going forward. I think, we're seeing municipalities across the province, across the country, bring these motions forward, looking to staff to strengthen our policies, to be a part of Team Canada where we can, to expect that we should only do this if there was going to be huge change or significant change. I think it's good news that significant change isn't required in our policies, that we're already doing, supporting Canadian to a large degree. I look forward to staff bringing this back to council. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, if you have a motion arising, please.
Yes, I do, thank you. My motion is that staff report back to council on possible approaches for a new procurement policy that includes social procurement aspects.
Sorry, I might just rephrase the word new.
Okay, that staff report back to council on possible amendments to our procurement policy that includes social procurement aspects.
Would staff
Looking-
find that wording helpful? Or,
We know what you mean, yeah.
Okay,
so, thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have it seconded. I'll turn to the movers.
I don't know if all members of council are familiar with what social procurement is, but it's been something that a lot of municipalities have started doing in the last several years, and it's a way for us to assign value to things that are important to us in terms of the environment. It could be accessibility, climate change policies, it could reconciliation. So it's a way for us to consider those things and how the suppliers of our products are helping to support those things in the community. So it's an additional way to drive some of those things that are important to us in the town.
Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. And, you know, it's always hard when we have a motion arising and that's something that adds, we know, more work to an additional project. When, you know, our last council meeting, we received a report back on projects and how many get completed in a year. But I figure if you're under the hood anyway, then we know it'll take a little bit more time, but that this is something that a lot of municipalities have done, and larger municipalities with larger staffs have implemented social procurement policies many, many years before, because that is kind of in the zeitgeist in the 2010s. And so I feel, you know, it's probably about time for us to do this anyway, and we might as well do it all at once. That while it may be extra work to do a kind of a new thing, it's something that would have taken longer when we added it eventually later. So.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'm going to, before going to others, turn a question through to staff, and that is, if this motion carries and the intention of the motion, which I'll come back to after asking this question, is to have the all the motions occur concurrently, what would be the timeline that staff would then, staff indicated October or August or September if it was with regards to the original motions, but if it were to include social procurement, how might that change the timeline, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the best way forward is to let me chip away at it and see how it goes, and if it's looking like the additional layers are going to take considerable more time, I'll let you know, and I'll bring forward something in the interim.
That's helpful, thank you. Further discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, thank you. Just to clarify my intention, so I wasn't expecting that they be all three done at once, and I kind of thought exactly as Mr. Hissick articulated, that maybe they'll look at it, and as Councillor Duncan says, while they're under the hood anyways, can we get this done? Or are we gonna have to get parts or something from somewhere else that's gonna take longer? So I'm happy to leave it to staff's discretion as to, in terms of timing and where they can fit in that work.
Thank you. And I'll turn to Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor, and I do appreciate that sentiment from yourself and council about the additional time that this would take. Having been involved in social procurement at the provincial level and assisting with local governments in the scoping of that work, it's quite a significant undertaking. And so while I believe there's value in it and worth pursuing, I do think it is a much more comprehensive exercise than what we're anticipating for the tariff amendment. So I agree with Mr. Hissick's approach of having a look at it and reporting back to council on what kind of implications it really does take.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We're turning to 13B, which is Police Dispatch Services Agreement with ECOM. I'll turn to Mr. Edwards for an introduction, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. So you have before you what is a 9-month agreement with ECOM for police 911 dispatch services. In an effort to achieve 911 dispatch efficiencies in the region shifted towards ECOM as the sole provider, as we heard a little bit about that earlier this evening. Previously, the dispatches in the region were provided through a RCMP dispatch center in the West Shore, and the municipalities that had their own municipal police force had their own dispatch service arrangements. And municipalities that have municipal police forces are always paying 100% of the cost of all their policing services. The RCMP detachments do enjoy some provincial and federal funding based on population size, but however, RCMP dispatch centers were fully funded by the federal and provincial governments. When that shift was contemplated to a centralized service for the region, we were assured by the province at that time that the funding model would remain intact, and the municipalities that enjoyed funding from the province and the federal government would be left whole with that funding model. However, shortly after the transition was underway, the federal government announced that it would not fund ECOM as a dispatch provider because it was seen as a private entity, even though it is effectively a wholly owned municipal corporation. But the province then followed suit and said, okay, well, if the federal government is not going to fund ECOM, we will not fund it either. However, after lobbying from the 10 South Island municipalities who have RCMP detachments, the province said that they would provide transitional funding while we shifted over to the ECOM dispatch model. That transitional funding, fortunately, has been in place for almost 5 years, and it expired on March 31st, 2025. The 10 South Island municipalities continued to lobby very hard this last fall and winter together against or with the province to try to extend that funding to even further into the future, in an effort to ensure that there was more equity in the funding of dispatch services throughout the province. And additionally, the province had identified that they were undertaking a third-party review of ECOM's governance and financial models because there's been some concerns around ECOM organizational structure and management of that service. And so the 10 South Island municipalities were looking to try to postpone the transitional or extend the transitional funding at least until that provincial review was complete, and we understood what the recommendations were coming out of that. Fortunately, we were invited to participate in that review. We were the only one of the 10 South Island municipalities that were invited. And we had an interview with Ernst & Young, who's conducting the review, which we feel was well received and fairly represented our other 9 colleagues in the South Island. However, we're not clear, and the Ernst & Young folks aren't clear as to when that review will be completed and whether or not the report will be made public. But we're eagerly awaiting the outcomes of that report. Regardless of that report, though, we are in a position where we do need to enter into an agreement with ECOM to ensure that we have dispatch services for our community going forward. We believe we have exhausted all avenues of trying to gain additional funding from the province at this point, And all 10 South Island municipal staff members all agree that at this point in time, we should advance this 9-month agreement. It is only 9 months, which takes us to the end of December, so we will soon turn our eyes to what the next agreement for 2026 and beyond would look like. And ideally, we would have the outcomes from that provincial review, but I'm not holding my breath for that. It is entirely possible that we will find ourselves back before you later in the fall or early winter with a new agreement for 2026 and beyond for consideration prior to the provincial review being complete. However, at this point in time, we do recommend that council give approval for this 9-month agreement, and we'll report back to you as soon as possible with the outcomes of the provincial review.
Thanks very much, Mr. Edwards. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no problems seeing us move forward and sign the agreement. Obviously, we need the service, and it needs to be addressed, I think, in the background on an ongoing basis, a permanent resolution of this. The report mentions next generation 911 technology and where that undertaking is at with the province funding that. Is there an effort either by the 10 municipalities, UBCM, or others that you can speak to with respect to looking for a revenue stream there to help potentially with ongoing dispatch costs by revenue stream? I'm referring to a cell phone levy or something of that nature tied to the next generation technology.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the mayor to you, the conversations with the province have been pretty fruitful, I think. In the initial conversations, the province didn't seem to have an appetite to pursue cell phone call levies for next gen 911. However, since we initiated those discussions in the fall, it feels like the province has shifted and is already doing some calculations on what cost recovery might look like for that cell phone levy. Unfortunately, dispatch is an expensive service, and even if we used a average cell phone levy that is applied nationally, it would only generate the type of funding that may approach a third of the ECOM cost. So ECOM is about a $150 million entity, and by my calculations, cell phone levy would generate somewhere between $30 and $40 million of revenue for ECOM. But however, we do have to recognize there are other 911 police dispatch service providers in the province. It's not just ECOM, and so not all the cell phone revenue would go directly to ECOM. And there are other technology providers like Crest who would also be looking to try to tap into some of that 911 levy call revenue. And so we are hopeful that the province will implement the levy, though, because we do see it as a gap in funding that could offset the costs. And additionally, we are, as a collective group of 10 South Island municipalities, continuing to hold monthly or bi-monthly meetings to discuss this issue and path forward, and we are looking at all solutions and options that are available to us.
Thank
I may
you.
just in follow up, thank you for that, and you're correct. Crest is currently actively, looking to this source of revenue to help fund, at least to shore up from lost revenue in other areas, the opportunity to see some of this revenue go towards infrastructure, communications infrastructure, supporting not so much dispatch, but the communication network itself. I think those numbers anticipated by Crest were perhaps a little higher than what you cited, but nevertheless, I think that's what's important is the formula that's being put forward, and obviously that's the purview of the province, but with some insight from those organizations such as municipalities who have been, to a degree, caught off guard with with this transition. So I'm pleased to hear that that's an ongoing dialogue. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, just to be clear, my calculations were, just my estimates. I don't have the sophistication that Crest likely has, and my calculations were assuming that Ecom would only be receiving at a maximum 75% of the cell phone levy charges, not the totality of it.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Edwards, for the report, and to staff for answering some questions earlier on. Some other ones have arisen for me. And I noted, sort of through the discussion with the staff sergeant earlier, and through speaking to staff, that there seems to be based on our authorized officer strength, but there's no real detailed breakdown of the costs, and that may be a bit of an irritant for some, and I just, if we wonder if you might elaborate on, there's difficulties around that because you don't really know what you're paying for.
That's correct, Councillor. Through the mayor to you, staff have been trying hard to get clarity from Ecom on the allocation of costs across all the different customers that they serve, and however, there's a lack of transparency there, and that may be become more transparent or more clear through the provincial review or the recommendations that come out of that. And so that is an area where we have been pushing pretty hard on, and hope for more forecasting so that we can budget accordingly, and they understand our concerns. However, they're not in a position to provide us with any degree of confidence of even next year's costs that we might be incurring.
Thank you. In the actual agreement itself, it's just something that struck up for me. I looked for a bit of clarity, and it's under Section 8, Indemnity and Liability, in particular 8.8, Force Majeure. Ecom will not be responsible or liable anyway for any delays in or suspension of performance of its obligations under this agreement caused by, and I go down to C, strikes or labor dispute. So, just so I'm clear, does that mean if there is a strike or labor dispute, there could be issues with the kind of dispatch service we get?
That's correct. That is a possibility.
Okay. Leaving that one, that gives me some have to chew on that while other people are asking their questions. With regards to Appendix D, and Councillor Rintoul touched on it briefly, the next generation 911 technology, and it says significant funding assistance from the province. And when you look at Schedule D, and it shows the amounts that the province is paying for this year, is this a one-time levy, or is this something that would be a yearly levy? It wasn't clear to me.
Again, it's not clear to us the duration of the levy. The province has provided, I believe it is $90 million in funding towards next gen technology and rollout, and but we're not clear on how and when all of that funding will be applied.
So I guess as a follow-up, I guess it's pretty hard to know whether or not, if it does become a recurring levy on top of the dispatch levy, there wouldn't be any assurances at this time from the province that that's a fee that they could potentially continue to cover. But because if they don't, then our figures would be significantly higher based on the numbers they have on the Appendix D here, or Schedule D.
That's correct.
Okay. And my last question is, I did note that looking through the District of North Saanich agenda for tonight, that they were also having a discussion about this item, and they had listed as a third option to direct their staff to explore alternative dispatch service models. But having read the staff report, it doesn't sound like there's a lot of options out there. So I imagine that we would work with our fellow municipalities that are facing the same issue to try and find something that might work better for us.
That's correct. We are, as a group, continuing to look at alternatives, and so we didn't include that as a recommendation in our staff report, but we are actively looking into alternatives. It's important to note that if we were to try to shift services, it would take quite a bit of time, likely a couple of years to just shift services. And if we were trying to set up our own service, it would probably take, closer to 3 to 5 years to do that. There are some local governments in the province who have recently discontinued use of e-com, in particular 3 regional districts in the north, the Bulkley, Nechako, Skeena, Queen Charlotte, and the Fraser, Fort George have banned, I think it was Skeena, Queen Charlotte, or it might have been Central Coast, I may be getting one of them wrong. But 3 of the northern regional districts have banded together and exited from e-com and have initiated, as of January this year, their own dispatch service with the call center based out of Prince George. And so we will be reaching out to them to better understand the decision-making process and the establishment of that service. And we have also heard of some other lower mainland municipalities that may be considering alternatives too. I do know from my time in the Metro Regional District as a member municipality, there was a lot of dissatisfaction with e-com, and so there may be some opportunities presented there. The city of Nelson also operates its own dispatch service, and so we may be reaching out to them as well and to better understand how they operate.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. So we have those questions. We do have a recommendation, staff recommendation. Someone would move it forward. Councillor Novak.
Thank you, Mayor. The recommendation is, and I so move, that the agreement with Ecom Emergency Communications for British Columbia, Inc. for police dispatch services be approved for a 9-month term ending December 31st, 2025.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. I'll turn to the movers. Any more motivation?
I think we've had a fulsome discussion on this. Obviously, it's a difficult pill to swallow, considering that the province and the federal government have been funding this for so many years, and now it's being offloaded to us, and it does mean that if it continues, a substantial increase in our tax rates directly associated with this and specifically for this, which is going to be in addition to any other tax increases that we're going to be faced with next year. But I don't see an alternative, and I do appreciate staff doing their homework and looking into some alternatives. Perhaps in smaller communities, it might be more cost effective to do this on our own, perhaps not, I don't know. But hopefully we'll find out soon enough before we have to commit to another year with these people. But for now, I think we don't have much of a choice. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn to the seconder. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I will reluctantly support the recommendation. As staff has mentioned in questions earlier, I'm quite disappointed, multiple levels, but mostly with the lack of transparency around requesting money from our taxpayers, but not really giving us a breakdown of what it is for and why we're having to pay based on our size of municipality or officer complement. It's just, to me, it's kind of a little outlandish, I have to be honest. And you couple that with the added cost where if it's our fire department with our officers, they're having to be trained for basically a service that, because our BC ambulance service is understaffed, they're having to perform more duties and having to get more training. It's just another thing added on and added on and added on, downloaded to our municipality and others like us, particularly the South Island, the 10. So just more or less just want to make a comment and my dissatisfaction with the provincial government for downloading these costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Similarly, I'll support the motion reluctantly. It doesn't seem like we have a choice at this point. They have us over a barrel. We need to have this dispatch services. However, I'm hopeful and supportive of the work that staff are doing to look at other alternatives, and I'll be interested to see what comes out of this review, and hopefully that will give us some more information to look at whether alternatives might be feasible or not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I just want to add a note that I want to express appreciation on behalf of Council to first Mr. Hissick. Mr. Edwards indicated that this came up some 5 years ago. In fact, I remember the phone call the 10 South Island mayors with RCMP services were called to a phone call in the middle of December, and this was just foisted upon us through advocacy, not only by the mayors, but more so by the staff, and Mr. Hessick helped lead the path with the other municipalities. That did successfully lead to the extensions of funding, 2 extensions of funding, as Mr. Edwards indicated, for almost 5 years. And more recently, Mr. Edwards has helped coordinate some of the collaborative efforts to date and going forward. It is really unfortunate that while we were successful in getting those extensions and funding from the province, that our requests for equity, that is with this being considered with other RCMP municipalities in the province, but moving forward, starting 5 years ago on considering cell phone levy or other options to help, wasn't pursued. That we were told by successive, and there have been different ministers and there have been different ADMs in the ministry. We've been told that we're providing this extension and funding so that you can transition to taking on these costs. Well, that wasn't what we were seeking to do. But the main point is expressing appreciation to staff for the work to date and going forward. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that does carry unanimous. And we're going on to item 13C, request for street vending license. Candy time. I'll turn to Mr. Newcomb, please, for an introduction.
Thank you. Good evening. So for many years, the town has organized a fireworks event on June 30th as part of the Canada Day, Sidney Days celebrations. In 2023, council approved a food vendor for that event, Holy Cow Mini Donuts, and in the subsequent year, 2024, staff, as per the street vending policy, approved them to operate again at the event. And this year, we understand they are coming back again. And this year, in addition to that, Candy Time, another street vendor, has applied for a similar license to participate in the event. Staff initially started to bring that forward as an individual application, but on review of the file, we saw that in 2023, council had authorized up to 4 additional vendors to be approved for the event. And because this is a town organized event, it would just make more sense for staff to organize a number of vendors every year for this event, just as a more efficient approach to having food services at the event. So the recommendation is to delegate the approval to staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Newcomb. I'll turn if there are any questions. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. Just this particular application itself, just looking at the photograph that they've attached, it appears to be something different than just a mobile vending cart, because it's actually, part of it's actually out on the sidewalk. So would that be something that we would be comfortable allowing? Because isn't it normally just a truck and you walk up to it?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, we understand this vendor does have some sort of appendages that they can put out. In this situation, previously what we've done on Eastview is to have some traffic cones that delineate the edges of the food truck or the food cart. So we'd be looking at those details and making sure that nothing's out in the public right-of-way or obstructing the sidewalk. But those are details that staff would nail down before the event.
Okay, and one more if I may. In the recommendation itself, it mentions applications, but there's actually no set amount. Does staff have should we be providing if we approve the recommendation with like up to, like we've said, up to like 4 or 5 or 6, but not just an open-ended amount? So that could be, I mean, staff's discretion obviously, but I'm just wondering in terms of the motion stuff, if we should be more specific about what we're saying we should be allowing.
Staff don't expect another vendor to apply for this, so there's only 2 at the moment. That stretch of Eastview could definitely accommodate probably up to 5 similar type of operations. Don't see those coming. If there was a need to sort of go beyond the available space, staff could certainly come back to council or look for other areas that would make sense. But yeah, it would sort of fit into the planning for the event, and I mean, if we did get inundated with, with street vendors, you know, likely we could accommodate them all, but if it was an issue, we could come back to council as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. Question through you to staff. If you could refresh my memory on the policy, do we have something in there about accessible parking spaces not being used? I can't remember if it's specifically in there or not.
Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe, I don't believe there's anything that specific in the policy. Generally, what staff look for is if there is a parking spot being used, that it's maybe a lower use spot. I can't imagine staff approving a food truck in an accessible parking space. I just don't think that would happen. I don't think there's anything specific about that in the policy, but it's certainly something we'd watch out for.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that it's kind of on staff's radar. I mean, there have been situations in the past where accessible parking spaces have been used for things other than accessible parking. So as long as it's on staff's radar, and that would be a condition, that they can't extend their appendages or put their garbage cans or anything, that those accessible spaces would be clear of anything, so.
And certainly looking to keep the sidewalks clear as well, and make
Right.
sure there's nothing blocking the path of a wheelchair or anything like that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we do have a staff recommendation. Would someone like to move that recommendation? Councillor O'Keefe?
I'll move that staff be authorized to approve with conditions applications to operate mobile vending carts on public property during the Sidney Days June 30th fireworks event for 2025 and in future years as per the requirements of street vending policy DV010.
Second.
We have it moved in second. I'll turn to the movers.
Nothing to more to add.
Nothing to add? I won't be supporting this motion. I appreciate the staff report and the rationale within the staff report, but the history as provided in the staff report, and the more recent history provided in the staff report, is that we've had one vendor request to set up, and approval was given for Eastview Drive, and in that motion at that time, council also approved up to 4 other vendors in that stretch of Eastview. As it turns out, there weren't other vendors that came forward. However, that motion only applied to to that particular year. So I am supportive of a motion that covers not only this year but goes into the future. But my concern with this is that there has been sensitivity by the downtown business community to street vendors, particularly on the waterfront and on Lower Beacon Avenue. I'll note that this motion, as it's worded, would allow vending carts on public property during Sidney Days. It doesn't specify the property. It would include Eastview, but it could include other areas of town property. I think, quite frankly, having attended these events for a number of years, that I don't know how you could actually find room on Lower Beacon or that waterfront area. But I'm in favor of a motion that would delegate to staff this year and in future years to approve street vendors to operate on Eastview Drive, rather than giving consideration to potentially other town property areas. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, and thanks for bringing up that point, something I hadn't considered, but thinking about it, I think something, and I know that we've had concerns before about how this impacts, brick and mortar sort of cafes and outlets in the downtown area. In this instance for June 30th, I'm okay with it because there's thousands of people down there, and I don't think that the local operators of cafes, restaurants, ice cream shops are going to suffer negatively from this because of the thousands of people that are already down there. So in this case, I think for this particular event only, that I think there's enough room to satisfy everybody's needs. So I'm supportive for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. With respect to the previous speaker's comments, I don't think it addresses the concern the mayor raised, and that's specific pockets of congestion potentially depending on where mobile vending carts are permitted. And the motion that's been put forward refers to public property as opposed to, say, public property along Eastview Drive, which might be a simple amendment to satisfy everyone. So perhaps I'll test the waters, if I may, Chair. I'd like to make an amendment.
Sure, certainly.
I'll move that the motion be amended to read that staff be authorized to approve with conditions applications to operate mobile vending carts on public property along Eastview Drive during the Sidney Days June 30th fireworks event for 2025 and in future years as per the requirements of street vending policy DV 010.
We have it moved. Do we have a seconder on the amendment?
Second.
We have a seconder. I'll turn to the movers.
Thank you. No, I think the mayor spoke the concern given the volume of visitors in certain areas of town and congestion. I didn't take those concerns to address perhaps a competitive environment. I concur with Councillor Keith's comments that it's a busy, well-attended event. So I don't think that was the point of the concern. It was more congestion in certain areas and perhaps even, safe and efficient movement of people and businesses conducting commerce as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The seconder?
Oh, thank you. I think this is a good amendment that I think addresses both the balance between having, an active public event and I thought the mayor's concerns he was bringing forward from the business community was what they usually have with, these large events. For a lot of them are going to help make them viable for long stretches of time. Is very much more expensive to rent a brick and mortar store than it is to run a food cart. And so when we allow food carts, we could put that into conflict sometimes with people who are really needing that income. In this case, I would have gone with the first motion simply because I don't think we have somebody who vends candy in this way, except for maybe the home hardware, which is so far from the waterfront. So I didn't feel they were in a conflict, but I do like being sensitive to the idea that there would still be one. The fireworks, and again, are also at night when I think most of those businesses would have been closed, thus removing that conflict. But I think that this addresses both the congestion issues and the appearance of how we're actually trying to balance these two. So I'm happy to move it forward.
Thank you. Further discussion? Just a new point that I wanted to add that I didn't mention the first time is that I certainly have confidence in staff to take into account congestion, if there was applications and they were considering other areas. But if we were to approve the unamended policy, then vendors will know that our policy, it is with staffed, and they could say, well, you have a policy that theoretically allows us to locate in Beacon Park or Lower Beacon Avenue and that sort of thing. And then, staff, if staff make the call, then it looks like we're coming down hard and that sort of thing. And so I think the amendment meets the demand. We've had one vendor to date, and we have a second vendor, and we're indicating that there could be up to 5 vendors on Eastview Drive. So I think until such time that circumstances were to change, that this amended motion would serve us well. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question on the amendment. All in favor? That carries unanimous. I'll now call the question on the amended motion. All in favor? And that carries unanimous. Thank you. We're next turning to item 13D, which is the road closure, Sidney BIA Pride Month event. I'll turn to Mr. DeMayer, please, for an introduction. Good evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. The Sidney BI submitted a parks use application to host a Pride Month event at Beacon Park Pavilion and Beacon Park Causeway for Saturday, June 14th from 11 a.m. till 3 p.m. The request is also asking for the closure of Beacon Avenue East of the Rainbow Crosswalk, as well as the use of sound amplification for the event. The event will feature information booths, local vendors, live stage music. They're expecting about 40 participants plus, and they're expecting about 300 spectators plus to the event. The report is seeking council approval for the road closures and use of amplification for this event.
Thanks for the introduction. I'll turn if there are any questions. Councillor Duncan.
Oh, the inevitable question about bathrooms for events. They aren't requesting, or we're not requiring them to need extra bathrooms, I'm guessing because we have a new bathroom down there. What is the number of people expected that would trigger us to request additional bathrooms again?
Through the mayor to councillor, there are various regulations that point to different numbers depending on, and a lot of it depends on if there's food and beverages being served. So there's various ranges depending on the numbers and the type of event. This small scale event, our public washroom, which is very close by, would certainly be more than adequate.
All right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We do have a Councillor Rintoul.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And forgive me, perhaps it's assumed, but again, perhaps on the size of the event, it's not a requirement. Is there a requirement as part of this for indemnity insurance, the town to be named?
Through the mayor to Councillor Rintoul, yes. Any event held through an application, they are required to provide indemnity insurance.
Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a recommendation. Councillor Rintoul? Sorry, I can only look one way at a time.
I'll move it. You can, that the Sidney BAA be authorized to use sound amplification and to close Beacon Avenue east of the Rainbow Crosswalk during their June 14th, 2025 celebration of Pride Month event at Beacon Park.
Second.
We haven't moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Sorry, I should have earlier asked this, about the sound amplification. Council has approved, I recall numerous times. Have we ever had any problem with sound amplification? And I guess where I'm kind of heading is this something that might be better just delegated to staff rather than council dealing with it in the future? If staff have any thoughts on that one way or the other?
Thank you. Through the mayor to Councillor O'Keefe. The bylaw was some time ago updated to give staff authorization to approve events for up to 250 participants. Anything over the 250 was required to come back to council. If council were so desired to change that number or expand staff's authorization, that'd be a directive that we could take.
Okay, I think that's good. Well, 250, I mean, I think a lot of the events are more than that, so I'm not at this time prepared to make a motion because I'm not sure what that number would be, but I would be receptive at some point in the future to hearing staff's input on how we might delegate more rather than having to come to council.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call the question. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. And under 13E, we have the monthly building report for April 2025. There's no recommendation. It's for information. Are there any questions or comments from colleagues? I'll just note and express appreciation to staff, the addition of a line for small-scale multi-unit housing, and that there is one project noted in the most recent report. Not seeing any discussion, we're now we have no correspondence for council discussion. We do have 4 items under correspondence for information. We don't require a motion. I'll just note, in the event that anybody does either watching the meeting or tune into the meeting, that regarding the correspondence that we continue to receive on the development, this is under 15.1, the proposed development at 9972 3rd Street. While there is an application on our project page. It has not yet come before council, and any correspondence that has been received to date or is received in future will go to the council meeting that it does come, or committee of the whole or council meeting that it does come forward. And with that, we have no notice of motion, and I'm going to thank Councillor Garnett for 7 years of reading our notice of motion. And he doesn't have it memorized because it changes. There are different reasons for us to go in, so he has to actually read, pay attention. So thank you, Councillor.
Well, you're welcome, Mayor. It's been my honor and privilege.
You're not retiring.
I'll move that it is in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters regarding personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for position of the municipality pursuant to section 90.1A of the community charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
We have it moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries. We'll reconvene at 10 after 8 in camera. Thank you. Thank you, staff.